Are the Houston Texans about to enter an era similar to a team that's across town from them? Let me explain. Welcome into the channel. I'm Cody Stoots. Let's talk some Texans and let's talk some Houston Astros as well. Happy opening day to those who celebrate. Are the Texans close to being where the Astros are right now in Major League Baseball? Yes, I know it's baseball and football. They're extremely different sports. 162 versus 17, so on and so forth. The physicality of both games is different. I get that. So we're not going to do a super tight comparison on this one, but elements of that championship culture that the Astros put together over the past few seasons and elements that you can see maybe developing for the Houston Texans, I feel like there's some crossover between the two teams. So Texans maybe getting into their Astros era of things. Let's take a look at it. Well, the three things that I wanted to look at, and I kind of see it playing out that way, is obviously having the dudes. The players are the most important part. The non-players are super important. Coaches, general managers, things like that. And then lastly, having a plan and sticking to it until you need to deviate from it. So let's talk a little bit about the players. Look, the situation for the Astros turned into an absolute monster. You think about 15 and they had some success and they made the playoffs unexpectedly. They had some really nice players on that team. Dallas Keuchel's success, Jose Altuve then. And then 17, by the time it got there, man, they were rolling with a good mix of veterans who've played a lot of baseball and obviously young guys who are just getting started and starting to take off for that team. The Houston Texans are in a similar situation. Now, these Astros players are going to play for close to a decade, some of them maybe more for this team. The Texans players, with football, you're lucky to get guys, 5, 6, 7 years and have peak performance out of them. So that's not the comparison, but you need that good mix of players. You need some young guys that are a little bit cheaper. Obviously in baseball, you have a lot more cost control on those players because of the arbitration process, but the rookie contracts for the NFL make players cheap and make it easy to spend on veterans, which you need big time veterans. You need guys with varying levels of experience as well, guys who've been around the block, guys who've played some big-time playoff series that can help impart some of that knowledge and get you ready over the course of the season to play in the playoffs, to play in the big games. And I feel like both these teams have some of that. Obviously, the Astros have a ton of it now, but even going into 2017, they had some players that were young guys that were cheap, that were making it happen, veterans, a nice little mix. The Texans have that too, obviously led by the young guys that are inexpensive. C.J. Stroud, Will Anderson, Tank Dell, and a handful of other players on their rookie contracts, not close to getting the giant, crazy mega deals that you sometimes see from successful players in the NFL. That's one of the biggest elements. But you also need players who maybe weren't as good as you thought they were to take that next step. Dallas Keuchel is the example I'd use for the Astros. Keuchel was a solid pitcher. He had some things that you'd point to that he did really well. He was a Gold Glover before he ended up winning the Cy Young and becoming a key piece to what the Astros did in that rise to where they are right now. Nico Collins is that type of guy for the Texans. He's a guy that first couple of years in the league wasn't that successful, and then by the middle of this past season, he'd already eclipsed his total production in the NFL, and he's turned into a big-time wide receiver. And you look at some of the statistical categories where Nico Collins shook out compared to some of his peers, he was a big-time top 12, top 10 wide receiver in a lot of those categories, and that's something that you have to have happen, the unexpected greatness from a player or two. Of course, you've got to add those veterans and have guys that play a certain and specific role for the team. The Texans have done that with Danielle Hunter, going out there, adding to their pass rush, replacing a player in free agency with Danielle Hunter, replacing Jonathan Grenard, who left, and going out there and getting him. It's not quite the same with the Astros. I'd look at it like getting Garrett Cole in a trade when the Astros knew they were going to have some guys depart from that pitching staff, and they went out there, got Cole. He was one of the better pitchers in all of baseball for just a couple of seasons, like Danielle Hunter is currently signed up for the Astros. So again, it's not one-to-one, but you look at the composition and how it's put together with the team, and you start to see, hey, young guys that are successful, old guys that have been around the block. I don't know if there's that Justin Verlander just yet. 2017, of course, the Astros needed him, but not quite there on that Texans team yet. Maybe he's going to show up here a little bit later on for the Texans. Remember, the Astros unexpectedly made the playoffs and had a nice little run, and then a couple of years later were competing for a championship. And the Texans just unexpectedly made the playoffs, had a nice little run. Maybe they could be competing for a championship pretty soon. To do that, they're going to need some of the non-players as well. Look, A.J. Hinch, and I'll never forgive him for the 2019 into the World Series, but A.J. Hinch was a fantastic manager for this team. Now, DeMeco Ryans has a lot more effect on the game than A.J. Hinch. Hinch, to an extent, has to kind of just let the ball roll out there and have his guys trust him. And I know DeMeco Ryans would tell you that the players matter the most, but he calls the defense. It's a game of deciding when guys need to be in, when guys need to be out from that standpoint in football, from certain defensive sets, putting a governor on the offense or letting the offense go as the head coach. You know, DeMeco Ryans has his hands on a lot of stuff, and he affects the actual games a little bit more than I feel like A.J. Hinch did, but they're both showcasing early on in A.J. Hinch's time and then here through a year with DeMeco Ryans. They both showcased some fantastic potential to turn into big-time, obviously a manager or head coach. They've showcased some great potential there. And then their colleague that's also a non-player, the general manager, Jeff Luhnow for the Astros, Nick Caserio for the Houston Texans. I mean, man, there's some definite comparisons there with Nick Caserio, a very analytical approach and how he talks about football and some of the things that it seems like the Texans use that are beyond just your traditional stuff. Jeff Luhnow was a cutting-edge type guy going out there acquiring players. When he made mistakes, he went out there and acquired guys to fix his mistakes. Nick Caserio's doing much of the same. It's a lot easier to do what Caserio does than what Luhnow did because you get the new draft picks every year. Those guys help you right away. They put together the plan right away and start executing it from that general manager standpoint. Luhnow's standpoint, you draft a guy, it might be 5-6 years before he shows up to help you on the big league club. So there was a little bit more runway that Luhnow had to execute than Nick Caserio. But Caserio has done a good job setting the Texans up for success. He made a big trade last year and didn't gut a draft to do it. He got two of the top players in the first two picks that he made in last year's draft. He went out there and added a couple of more players that were productive. He's been a shrewd negotiator when it's come to free agent contracts and additions there. He's had a misstep or two. I don't love the Titus Howard contract, but Caserio has done a really nice job, especially when those first 2 years are, you can kind of wash him away. And as Hannah McNair said at the annual meetings this week, unprecedented circumstances that he had to deal with. Well, once things kind of normalized for Nick Caserio, he's turned into a really nice general manager with some excellent moves under his belt. He and DeMeco Ryans, the A.J. Hinch and Jeff Luhnow of the Texans situation. Now, the final comparison, and again, it's baseball and football, so it's a loose one, but a final comparison for the Texans entering their Astros phase is the Texans clearly have a plan on how they're going to approach things, and they haven't had to drastically deviate from that plan just yet. Now, this one is not totally the same because, again, for baseball, you have to plan so many years in advance. You have to look at minor league guys that have been around for a few years, guys that are going to come up, fly through it. But Jeff Luhnow had a plan. They were going to be bad. They were going to get a lot of draft picks. They were going to hit on those draft picks, and then the guys that they would continue to develop and do well with, they would use them for trade chips, or they'd bring them up and they'd be big-time players on the team. The Texans don't have that much of a luxury, but you look at some of the players that had some of their most productive seasons that had been elsewhere prior to this past season. I think about a guy like Blake Cashman and Sheldon Rankins. Rankins had one of his most productive seasons in the past 5, and then Cashman had his most productive season as an NFLer. That's a credit to the coaching staff and the development of the organization, as well as the player having that ability to be drawn out of him. So DeMeco Ryans, Nick Caserio, the coaching staff for the Texans, they've got to continue to do that, and it's probably even more important for them over the next few seasons to maximize the players that they have. And Jeff Luhnow had a lot more options from a baseball standpoint. He had a lot more spots to fill when a guy left as well, because the guy moves up through the ranks, yada, yada. The Texans, they got 53 plus the practice squad. But when a guy leaves, if you don't have someone ready to replace him, sometimes you've got to keep sinking stuff into that spot. and it becomes one of those pot-committed situations, kind of like where the offensive line is for the Texans right now. It wasn't stable. It never got stabilized. They keep dumping assets into it. Hopefully now it's got to stabilize. And when the big contracts start rolling in for the Texans, when Will Anderson, if he continues on a hot streak through the rest of his rookie contract, ends up as one of the highest paid pass rushers, or when C.J. Stroud, if he keeps on this roll, ends up as one of the highest paid players in all of football, you've got to be able to maximize those back of roster guys, those free agent additions that were a bargain that turn into a really nice player, those midseason waiver claims, which the Texans showcased they could do a little bit of that this past season. You've got to maximize those assets that you do have if you're the Texans. And then when you need to deviate from the plan, when you need a little injection, a little punch of excitement and talent, well, the Astros went and got Justin Verlander. The Houston Texans have never been, under Nick Caserio, afraid to make a trade. Don't know if there's a Verlander-esque player, but deviate from the plan when it's absolutely necessary. Because I got to imagine when Jeff Luhnow sketched everything out, he didn't think Justin Verlander was showing up. Maybe that's the case for the Texans with a big-time player here in the near future. What do you think? Am I a little bit too far out of the limb? Is the limb of the tree breaking? Maybe you're not even a baseball fan and you think this is goofy, crazy, and you don't care, and you're thinking to yourself, hey, football boy, get back to the football. Let me know in the comment section down below. On your way down to the comment section, throw me a thumbs up on the video. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Enjoy baseball season if you are indeed a baseball fan. We've got just over 100 or so days till football season gets back going for the Houston Texans. Baseball is a nice little appetizer for football season, and it keeps us going there through those summer months. I grew up loving baseball. Now I'm a football guy, though. Went from the leather baseballs to the pigskin, if you will. I'm a big football guy. Now, as you can tell, if you followed this channel at all ever before. So appreciate you watching. Hope you enjoyed the little bit of a reach, a little bit of a stretch video that I put together in honor of opening day getting going with the Astros. But hopefully I'm right, and the Texans are entering their Astros era. How about a couple of Super Bowls, a couple of Lombardi trophies? It'd be pretty darn fun. We'll always talk about that, the good, the bad, the ugly. It's all here on the channel. We're always talking about the Houston Texans right here. Appreciate you watching. Hope you enjoyed the video. Can't wait till we talk Texans again soon.